Hi everyone, this is Kate from Moonflower Moments. Welcome and welcome back. Today I'm filming my next installment in my Tarot 2025 series in which I go through all of the decks that are in my tarot collection. So today I'm going to share with you all of the decks that I keep at my altar year round. So my altar, quote unquote, is really just the shelves that are inside of my desk. My desk is kind of tiered. It has multiple layers because it's an apothecary desk. And so I do most of my altar work right here at my tarot table. And these are always the ones that I keep in reach, specifically because I really appreciate the sense of somberness and kind of sacredness that I have in my connection with these decks. So I would go ahead and say that these are the decks that I definitely treat with the most reverence. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started by sharing the first deck that I ever got. Y'all knew that it was going to be on this list. I keep mine in this beautiful container, and that is going to be Terra Botanical. So I feel like I have to start out with this deck because it is such an integral part of not only my tarot practice, but my tarot history. So I actually have two copies that I keep out on my altar. This is the one that I use for myself only. And I use this around massive kind of ritualesque readings, such as the Wheel of the Year. I use this the day after my kids graduate. That's really important to me, to be able to kind of mark the beginning and the ends of specific times. I oftentimes use this before the school year starts. There are specific moments in my life that are very cyclical, and I always return back to this deck because it's the one that supports me through those cyclical cycles. So with that being said, this deck is very transformative in how I use it, but also the way that it unlocks my intuition. I am someone who definitely prefers pip decks in the way that I feel like my intuition has room to kind of climb in on this like white space. It's really black space, but either way, for me, oftentimes if there is less on the card, there's more for the intuition to take over. And so I really use these decks primarily as kind of a placeholder in my practice to be able to get a kind of sense of the energy. And in that kind of case, because this Four of Cups is so sparsely depicted, you know, it can mean anything from hangover to apathy to perhaps emotional contentedness and stability because it's associated with that four. It could be a sense of like holding back, like two of you are holding back because you don't feel as secure as these people that are above and on top of you. And so I like that there's so many different layers that I can read in with this because the deck allows me room to kind of step in for myself. So very treasured, very cherished. If y'all want a full walkthrough of this, I have been really meaning to do that, and just let me know. I think it's time. I talk about this deck too much to not honor it in that kind of way with a special video. So that was Terra Botanical. The next deck that I want to share with you is going to be my 1971 RWS. I actually picked this up at a little thrift store. And when I walked in, I immediately started looking around for tarot decks because like I don't know how to describe it other than to say like I knew that there was a tarot deck in that room. I just had to find it. And when I went to go check out, I was like, oh, I guess my intuition was wrong because I didn't see one. And I looked right underneath the register and this deck was waiting there. So this is a deck that I will forever cherish for that because I really feel like this deck called to me in an unbelievable sense. A lot of times when I'm sitting down to my altar, I'm in a headspace where I'm feeling very emotionally overwhelmed. And it is really reassuring for me to have a nice, clean, simple RWS in those moments. Because even though I do love the intuitive process of a pip deck where my intuition can step in, where I feel like the meaning isn't so clearly depicted, sometimes I really need more support. And when I need that support, because my mind is, say, for example, having a difficult time kind of drawing and filling in those blanks, this is the deck that I go to. I think its coloration is really interesting because it's an older deck. You can see he definitely has a lot more pink to him. And so this deck calls my attention to different things that I typically wouldn't notice. Like this guy has like a white outline. I don't know if that's typically how that's portrayed in the Centennial, but I have the Centennial and the Centennial doesn't look quite like that. So I like that in a way it allows my eye to catch something that I might have not noticed before, just simply with the different coloration since I did learn on a Centennial. So this was my 1971 RWS. Next, I'm going to talk about the two that I consistently use for personal empowerment. And the first one that I want to share with you is going to be the Tarot by Manzel. When I'm working at my altar, I really want my decks to represent the reverence of the work that I'm doing. When I work at my altar, it's not quick reads. It's readings that will stay out for an extended period of time. And I want my deck to really show nothing fluffy, but something that's very serious to honor that space that the cards are going to be in for an extended period of time, where my headspace is going to be for an extended period of time while I'm working with this energy. So I like this deck for that reason, because a lot of these people, if you look at their faces, have very somber expressions. All of them look very serious. Here we go. We have the Queen of Cups, and you can see just from her face. The Queen of Cups, I believe, is always serious, but there's a sense of tranquility here, but there's also a sense of like deep, an absolute kind of power and like sureness that I really appreciate being depicted in the cards. Because these cards are so detailed, I also can get very lost in examining the details of this artwork. Similarly to the 1971 RWS, like this is just an RWS, right? But because it is so depicted with rich layers and rich details, I kind of slow down when I'm working with this deck and really take the time to examine what's actually in the card. And when I'm feeling particularly overwhelmed, that can be a very soothing process for me. And also because it's so detailed, there's details here that I might not see the first time I sit down with this card, but if I lay it out on my altar, I might see it later on when I choose to work within the energy of that card a few weeks later. So this was the Tarot by Manzel. I love the edges. This is like my favorite thing when creators do. It's so pretty. Another deck that I like to use for empowerment at my altar is going to be Barbara Walker. Barbara Walker and I were not friends for a very long time, and then we came to love each other, or rather, that is deck personification at the max. I came to love her. I think when I was coming to Barbara Walker, I wasn't coming to Barbara Walker with enough of serious inquiry. And so similarly to the decks that I've shown before, this is a deck that just by the very nature of its keywords really wants to kind of slap you in the face with the injustice of what's going on. And sometimes that's hard to swallow, and sometimes you really need to sit in that. And so these are cards that I need more than just one cycle to work with. I need multiple cycles because, like, say for example, we have 10 of Pentacles here for protection. Yeah, typically protection would not be the word that's associated with it. It would be family or lineage or wealth. And all of those three things can offer you that sense of protection, but protection means that there's like an extra bite to it. Like there's something else that's there that you kind of have to watch out for. And so I find that to be very compelling because it slows me down and gets me to really think about my situation. You know, for example, 9 of Wands, instead of it being resilience, it is defense. So it's just a little bit grittier and a little bit more harder edge. And as someone who tends to see the world with rose-colored glasses, I like a deck that can just kind of tell me what it is, even if it means that I'm going to have to sit on those lessons for quite some time, such as 8 of Wands Fall. That's very unique. So this was Barbara Walker. And as you can see, I'm actually showing you the boxes for most of these because my altar decks are the only ones that I keep in the original packaging. All right, next I want to show you the deck that I use for altar work. So I actually have 2 copies of this. This is my original Story Through Stone. I'm going to show you the 2nd edition by Sandera Quackenbush. I was having a discussion with like a lovely, lovely friend of mine the other day, and if you're watching, I think you know who you are, about how she likes to use Lenormand to communicate with ancestors, because when people pass, a lot of times their bodies and their minds, of course, are not typically associated with some of the ideas that we might currently have. And so they communicate in more of a fragmented lens. And so it's easier for, she claims, ancestors to use Lenormand because it's a series of very straightforward communication. And when she and I were having this conversation, I felt very similarly about my Story Through Stone deck. This is how I have traditionally used this deck, is for ancestor work, because I feel like if there is residual energy after someone passes, which is my personal belief, I do practice ancestor work pretty heavily, that at the end of the day, I want them to have the opportunity to communicate to me in a way that allows for that lack of form that they might be experiencing. So in that kind of way, a lot of times when I sit down to work with my ancestors, I will pull one of these cards to ask, like, how are you? You know, where are you right now? How are you? And then I kind of greet with them and work with them, if they even want to work with me at all, depending on the card that I receive. So for example, there are some cards in here that very clearly remind me of fishing. Let me go look. So there's multiple, but this is a card that definitely reminds me of like fishing. And so I know if I pull this card for an ancestor, they perhaps maybe are not in a space where they can emerge and talk to me, either because, you know, this is very silly, they're fishing, or because from a realistic point of view, this looks like a body of water and they're currently swimming with the other souls that are in that afterlife. But I definitely call it like my gone fishing card. But more closely, I think in a spiritual sense, like just kind of they're a part of that larger water form and not able to articulate in an individual sense at that time. So if that wasn't too weird for you, but I don't know if I've ever really spoken about my ancestor work in that much depth before, but this is always the set of cards that I go to for it. If my house caught on fire, I would probably be trying to grab this before it caught a flame. Not gonna lie, I really love this deck. And it's still in print, so it's a good one. And I did want to say, for anyone who hasn't seen that deck before, the Story Through Stones, it doesn't have a guidebook. Sandera Quackenbush does have some things listed on her Substack where she discusses what some of the cards mean for her, but the purpose of it is to be like open-minded. And I like that a lot. You know, the open-mindedness of the cards to let whatever comes through come through. All right, next I want to talk about the decks I use to work with my deities. So that would be the Jade Oracle, which is the deities and symbols of ancient Mexico, and the Illuminated deck of Holy Souls. Two very different energies. I'll start with the Jade Oracle first. One of my core values as a person is to really show honor and respect and reverence to different cultures. And so I initially bought this deck to pair with the Aztec Tarot because, I mean, it is a very culturally appropriate pair. But the Aztec Tarot to me is a deck that I use kind of on a daily basis. The Jade Oracle said to me, when you use me, pull a card, but I need you to sit on that card for a while. I don't want you to put me away immediately after you've used me. You need to sit and really ask yourself how this individual or how this symbol is appearing in your life long term. And so once I realized that that's how this deck wanted to be used, that's how I started to use it. And so I will oftentimes pull one of these cards. I'll let it sit on my altar for probably about 3 to 4 weeks, however long I feel like I need to have that anchor point. And then when I'm ready to move on from that, I do a ritual where I cleanse the card and I put it back into the deck and pull another one, either from this deck or the next one that I'm going to show. But I like to use these cards in a very long-term capacity. I like to really, really make sure that when I'm working with them that I read the guidebook, which is excellently written. I'll actually show you an entry if you'd like to see. And the guidebook is actually in Spanish and in English. So this is the guidebook for this card. I'll let you pause it in case you want to read it. But look, this line sticks out to me. Each time that a woman heals herself, she helps me to heal the earth. That is me. All is sacred. So I haven't even read the rest of it, but as you can see, there's no like keywords or phrases that you're supposed to walk away with. It's all concepts. It's all ideas. And so that definitely earns it the respect of being an altar deck because it's one that I need to work with on that long-term capacity. I love this. This card was out for a while for me. So this was my Jade Oracle. And just because I love like indie artists, I will go ahead and say this one was included on my most affordable favorite indies. It is really affordable, like under 40 bucks. So I think that's an appropriate price point for an indie if you want to check it out. All right, next I have the Illuminated deck of Holy Souls by Lindsay Williams. And I work with this one in a similar capacity. This deck is helping me to heal my relationship with Catholicism. I didn't have as terrible of an experience as some of the other people that I know that grew up where I am. Louisiana which is where I'm from, is very, 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 very Catholic, super Catholic. But where I grew up, I was actually one of the only Catholics in the area. I kind of like lived in and grew up in like a little Protestant sector. And we didn't go to church very often. So I wasn't really very attached to Catholicism. Even though I was confirmed in the church, I never really got the opportunity to study it as a entity at all. And so when I moved over here, where literally everyone is Catholic, it's very normal to be Catholic, I started noticing around me that, like, we have states, we have a place where I live that's called the Saint Streets, and we have Saint Peter, and some of the other ones like Saint John and things like that. And it's very interesting to me to be able to see the correlations between what I learn in this deck about these saints and then the places that are named after them in my town. And so I've been enjoying kind of adding a little bit of extra meaning to the place that I live in, because I'm using this deck very intentionally to say, for example, if I were to come across a statue of Saint Elizabeth, at least now I know her story and I know why that statue is there. Even if it's not like a faith that I actively practice, like I'm not a practicing Catholic, I still think it's really valuable for you to understand the religious structures that are in place in the place that you live, that other people honor and other people respect, just so you can understand that point of view and where they're coming from. So this was the Illuminated Deck of Holy Souls by Lindsay Williams. It has amazing linen cardstock and just this beautiful finish. And these card backs are ridiculous. I love them. They're so good. I could get that as a tattoo. All right, next I'm going to share the decks that I keep at my altar, but I only pull from a couple of times a month. These are ones that I truly work with long term. So here is the name of this one. I actually picked up this deck for like $2 at Goodwill. So it was a happy win for me. So I'm going to flip through these cards very, very, very slowly. So this is a new acquisition to my collection, but what I've decided to do is pull a card from this deck every 7 days and keep it on the altar. So right now mine is Lengthen Your Day, and it talks about looking for little areas in your life where you have dead time and spending a lot of time really making sure that every minute is intentional so that you're able to get the most out of your day as possible. So some of these things are really things that I want to work on like a long-term basis, such as slow down. I think it's very valuable to work with that on a 7-day period. Same with the power of touch, absolutely. Crack a routine, I would definitely want to have multiple days to work on. Relax your face, I could work on for 7 days, or I could work on like with a shorter capacity. But imagine how powerful it would be to be cognizant of your face for 7 days, you know? And so this is a very simple deck. It doesn't have anything on it except for these directions, but I find the prompts to be really compelling, and I have nothing like this. So this one is going to stay on my altar for sure. So here's the name of it. Another one that I'm using long-term right now is How to Be a Moonflower deck. My best friend just bought this for me for my birthday, so I've only pulled one card from it, but I absolutely know that this is going to be a set of cards that I use on my altar. So I'm actually going to do this like 2 ways. So hopefully we can see. We have the front that has like this instruction, but then on the back it actually has different artwork. So I'm going to flip as I go. So I have used this deck only one time, but I know, especially because my best friend purchased it for me, there is that level of sentimentality for it and like respect to that. This is a list of activities that you can do at night. And so I would want to take more than 1 day to be able to work with these cards. You know, take a night hike, that might be something that needs to be planned in advance. And so I want to make sure that I actually do these activities and I actually honor them. Keep a dream journal by maintaining these activities up for a longer period of time. I think the artwork is absolutely fantastic. I love this so much. So I don't have too much to say about this other than this is kind of similar to the other one in the sense of it's an activity deck. And so therefore it will sit on my altar for a longer period of time to ensure that I'm actually doing these activities that I am pulling. This kind of reminds me of like the creator of Roots and Wings artwork. I don't have that oracle, but it looks a lot like it. Listen for Nighttime Creatures. I love that so much. All right, so that was the How to Be a Moonflower, purchased for me, for my best friend, for obvious reasons. And I love this box, like it's one of those good boxes. Just very sensory happy. All right, next I have the Divining Poets Oracle by Lucille, not by Lucille Clifton, Divining Poets Oracle of Lucille Clifton. There we go. So this is a series in which poetry from prominent creators was collected, and the verses were put on the card to be used in divination. So I know that there is one for Emily Dickinson. Here's one for Lucille Clifton. There's a variety of poets that are featured. I love to use this in my daily draws. I actually talked a lot about this deck in that daily draw video that I did, so I'll leave a link in the description box below for it. But this is an extremely powerful deck. Even if I'm using it on a daily basis, there's something about this white space that says, shut the fuck up and listen to me. And I so appreciate that. You know, a lot of times I don't need the pictures. I don't want the pictures. I want the language. I'm a very language-driven person. It makes sense because I do teach English. And so I find sometimes that pictures can kind of detract from my experience. I know that's kind of like a little different of a take, especially because tarot is such a visual tool. But like the concept of it is the light in us, it is the light of us. I mean, I pulled this on very significant moments of my life where we know where we are, what we are. That's beautiful. I mean, that's a great way to start the day. There's not a single card in here that is light and fluffy. What then of the moon, the room, the bed, and the poetry of regret? It's actually hitting me really hard right now, so I'm going to go ahead and put this one up. So this was Divining Poets by Lucille Clifton. All right, another one that I keep at my altar at all times is going to be the Louisiana Cajun Creole Tarot by Cajun Conjurer, which is someone that I actually work with. So it's cool to have an indie deck creator so close to home. As previously mentioned with the Holy Souls deck, I am a big firm believer in working with spirits of place. I have a video in which I talk about how I do that, so I'll leave a link in the description box below. And so it's an incredible thing to have this on my desk because I know that there's always a placeholder within my practice for my home. And for the longest time, I lusted after Delta Enduring because I so desperately wanted that, but everyone knows that that deck is very out of print and very unaffordable. So I'm very happy to have this in a capacity to where I get to have my home represented in the cards. This is a place that I've chosen for all of its faults, for all of its problems, and so to see it reflected back to me is such a beautiful thing. The Truck for the Chariot is so good. I love that card. Beau Soleil, 5 of Fiddles, 7 of Accordions. I actually have one of the accordion paintings on my wall, the original from the artist. This is one of my favorite cards in the deck. I think this painting is so beautiful. All right. So that is the Louisiana Cajun Creole Tarot by Cajun Conjurer. And no matter which one you order from, so there's, you can buy the book and the deck, or you can just buy the deck, you get the box. And my friend actually custom wood burn this. So I just think that's really cool to have that nice personal touch. All right, and then we're on the final ones. These are the ones that I use on a monthly basis. So I use these at the start of my menstrual cycle. I've said this before, but it's part of my practice, so here I am. So this is the Prophet Oracle. This deck is very thematic in nature. And so I think that I need longer periods of time to work with a deck like this. So we have Come and Be One of Us, Open Your Body Onto the Heart of Life. Pleasure is a freedom song. I had this card twice in a row. Yeah, it was interesting. The land and the sea shall be bountiful. To you the earth yields her fruit. This is an amazing card to work with. I've worked with this a couple of times for a month-long period, and really, really beautiful to see the reception of that relationship that you can have with the earth. The ocean laughs always with the innocent. I went to the beach a few weeks ago, and this wasn't even a card I had actively on my altar, but I remembered this card. So I hold these sentiments very near and dear with me. Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. Make not a bond of love. This is a beautiful card I've received before. Be also the peacemakers. Sing to me a deeper song. It's just poetry. As you can tell, I really, really like poetry decks. So I am grateful to have this in my collection. It's one of my most treasured, and I can't think of any other deck to choose to work with for a month-long basis that is as good as this one. So that was the Prophet Oracle. All right, and the last one I want to share is Latero de Fim. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I have never taken French. And I can only show like 4 cards from this because I don't want this video to get taken down for nudity. But there are a lot of people who have shown this deck and have full walkthroughs of it, so I'll leave a link in the description box below to them. So I really like to use this deck at the beginning of my menstrual cycle along with the Prophet Oracle because it's a one that reminds me to be very body present. And I find that as women, it's important for us to really take the time to understand our changes in our body. I think just in general, I don't want to be exclusatory with my language. I think it's very important for humans, no matter what gender or sex they are, to be in tune with those shifts. And so this is a deck that continues to remind me to be aware of those shifts, to really engage with them and to lean into them and recognize that my cycle is part of this experience that I have being human. So I do work with these cards on, like I said, a month-to-month basis. I think that just the fact these women showed up and were like photographed naked means that it kind of like shocks your mind and says, you know, look what's in front of you. Like, pay attention to them. Like, they're kind of putting it all out there for better words. And it's important for you to hear their message. So this was La Femme Erratique. All right, so those are all of the decks that I keep at my altar at all times. I'll leave a link in the description box below to the other videos in this playlist. And if you have any of these decks, let me know if they're ones that you use on a more long-term basis, or if you have found ways to integrate them into your practice in a more like short-term, kind of like quick-fire reading capacity. I find that to be very interesting because, like I said, I feel like a lot of these decks call more towards like longer-term readings, but I'd be interested to see if y'all are using it in shorter capacities as well. So with that being said, thank you so much, and I will see y'all again next time.